Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing? You look
Good. It was a busy
tropical.
week.
Yeah, yeah, it was. How about with you? Where are you right now?
Oh, well, I'm traveling with my kids. It's their birthday and it's a big birthday. So we've
That's
come
awesome.
into the sun. How about you? Where do you find yourself today?
I'm just working at the home office. I got the villas being listed, so I'm just trying to go through, get all. That's 24 units that we're listing, so there's a lot of paperwork. My Amy, my wife, and I are trying to get through. So it's, but it's
Oh,
good.
that
It's
would be a
exciting.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. 24
24 of
different
them
listings
coming up.
going to market.
And do you have open houses coming up soon?
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna do the home show this weekend, and then we've got open houses starting on the first, and it'll be pretty much every single weekend after that. So I got a bit of a team
Amazing.
that's gonna be helping me out with it. It'll be good. Yeah,
I'm going to make it a point of stopping in at some more open houses in general, and definitely I'll come to yours too.
yeah. You should come check it out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I figured that one of the topics that maybe we should get to sooner than later and what our focus today could be, and it would be interesting to hear what you think about new builds too,
Sure.
is inspections. Where's their place? When do you do it? How do you decide who to put on your recommend list? I mean, there's lots of different pieces to touch on here, but when we talk
Sure.
about home inspection, what's the first things that come to your mind?
I think it depends on what context we're talking about, but I think I mean, it's, in my opinion, a good inspector is vital, especially if you're going to be in real estate as a realtor. And how I always look at it is this: if I'm going to hire an inspector, there's three different types. There's the type that is too laid back about everything and maybe not totally attention to detail, so things can get overlooked. There's the ones that are super harsh on everything and just come at it from a strong angle of this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and judging every home as if it was a brand new home. And then there's the third, the in between, and the ones that I always make sure that I work with, which are the ones that have a keen eye, have some kind of understanding of construction in the sense that they can find issues. They're realistic based on the age of the house, because every house, even brand new houses, are going to have issues that'll get found. But if they can at least give some kind of solutions or give some context to whether this is reasonable for the type of home, I think that's where you want to find it. And that's where you want to find it as a buyer, because you don't want to hear everything's wrong with the home without some kind of a solution. And you definitely don't want the inspector missing things. And when we're as real estate agents referring these inspectors, it's kind of our reputation on the line. So we recommend them. If they fall on either side of the spectrum too far, then our reputation gets hurt. So that's what I look at when I'm looking to hire the inspectors that I work with.
And I know that, having a few recommends on your list is always a good one. So it's not just here's the guy. It's more like here's some to choose from. Call these three or five or whatever, however many you have on your list, and letting the buyer ultimately or the seller sometimes also choose. But I'm thinking in regard to new build, I'm glad you brought that up too, is that when you have an inspector who is coming through, they're looking at a new build and then there's a opportunity to put some things on a deficiency list and some things that are just they're going to be how it is. I mean, how do you decide what to put on a deficiency list?
Things that aren't reasonable within the age of the home or that have been past the point of neglect. I Depending on the type of clause you're using, some clauses will have a dollar amount. So if an inspection deficiencies in the inspection exceed X amount, then it can be up for a renegotiation. And some are just kind of open to buyer discretion. So it depends on how you negotiate the offer. But I had an inspection last night actually that I was at, and it was a first time home buyer. And we actually met afterwards to talk about what stuff was reasonable and what stuff wasn't. And we decided that the things that needed immediate attention that weren't disclosed, that were clearly an issue, those are things that we would ask for. And things that were just kind of a sign of the age, reasonable within the age range, we let those go. And that's how we settled on the two sides of what we were going to address and what we were going to let go.
Right. That makes sense. And then when it comes to a holdback, how long, how much, is it a percent? Is it a dollar amount? So, I mean, I've been involved in a number of new build types of contracts myself. What do you see? What do you find if you were looking at this from even a seller perspective? So if I was coming forward with a buyer and I had a contract all written up and we had holdbacks, and if you're representing the selling side and it is brand new, then for holdbacks, what do you think you see or would expect to see for timeline and amount?
So just for clarity, we're saying like if, well, let's say from the buyer's perspective, if we have work that we're trying to get the seller to do, typically I want that done before we actually get to the completion date. So I might write something in that the seller agrees to have these actions done at professional standard. They'll provide receipt and invoices no less than 2 days prior to completion. In the event that that work's not complete, that's where we'd get into a holdback. And that holdback amount, I always try to make it more than what the work's worth. Because if you're less or right on, it's really easy for the seller to be like, ah, it was going to cost me that anyway. So I like to mark it up probably 10, 20%, at least 10 or 20%, because you want to say basically the conversation is just do it and do it right. We don't want to deal with the headaches. And at least the buyer's getting something for the time, or something is going to be held for the seller to be accountable to get it done. So this is where your contractors come in really important to making sure you understand just how expensive something can be.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And then in some rural areas, there actually isn't the opportunity for inspectors to come. So sometimes it is a contractor that ends up going through and doing inspection type things. Now, is that something that you have experienced sometimes as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Some people just prefer it if they're going to get an electrician in and a plumber in, and they're going to have HVAC people come through. I've had that happen as well. Um, the only thing you got to be careful of, I guess, is I like to, if I'm going to hire a contractor like an electrician or something, I get my clients to ask to pay them for doing the inspection. Because the problem isn't, it's nothing bad against them, but they've got time too. They run businesses. So for them to just come and quote out some work just for you to find out what's wrong and what's not, it's not a great position for them either. Because if they don't get the job, now they just kind of wasted an hour and a half of their time. And with the way things are now, everyone's time is worth something. So I always recommend, if you're going to go that route rather than an inspector, make sure that you hire the people and pay them to come out, pay them whatever their call out rate is, because they should be there, just there to work and help rather than just quote out a job. And it's tough. Like if you just have a pool guy, for instance, that was one of the contractors we did, and my guys paid for him, which was good, because if he comes out and he looks at it and says, yeah, this has to be replaced, this has to be replaced, it becomes a conflict of interest for him as well, as opposed to his job is to inspect. So you got to feel that side out. I definitely prefer inspectors, especially some of the inspectors that I deal with, because they do have, back in the day, it used to be that it was just your inspection cost was the cost of the liability. So if there was something missed by the inspector, it was the amount of the inspection that could come back. It's now evolved where a lot of these inspectors are holding insurance, where if they miss something on neglect, you'll actually get some coverage from it. And I had one of my favorite inspectors. I use him for everything. Used him for my house. He missed a deck one time. We got to the house on completion day. The deck was rotten. We went through the inspection. We called him, and he was awesome. He just missed it. And so my buyers hired, or got to hire contractors. They came out, they fixed it, and it was under the inspector's insurance. So that was a $4,000 cost. So I'm a big proponent of inspectors. I work with inspectors even on the listing side, just because I think they're super important to the transaction as long as you have the good one.
Hmm. Yeah, I think they totally are too. And I think that also living in more northern communities, one that has WETT wet inspection under their credentials, that was one that became even more important than I ever could have imagined when. Especially in Terrace, we ran into a lot of fireplaces. And for insurance purposes, to have a more recent wet inspection was really an important piece.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I remember too, because when I very first started out, I mostly was working with buyers, and buyers was really my focus, and especially in the first year or so. And I would be walking through properties and I would be pointing things out along the way. And I had buyers kind of more than one or two times say, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be trying to sell me this place? Like, why are you pointing all these things out to me?" And I personally liked to accompany on inspections so that I could see some of the things to pay attention to when these buyers in particular were going through with their inspector, because my answer was, nothing should be a surprise. You shouldn't be finding those kinds of things out after you've already signed a purchase agreement, or even, worse, maybe even moving in and you hadn't realized that, the floors didn't match, or, something else that was maybe even beyond an aesthetic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's smart. I didn't do that in the first few years of my business, and over time, I started to realize how important it is to at least attend the end of those inspections, just to get a run through from
Yeah.
the inspector and understand. Because if we're asked to renegotiate, we should know what we're talking about from firsthand.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask that next is, what parts of the inspection do you attend? So if you're there for the end of it, what do you expect that kind of walkthrough to look like?
That's just the last half an hour is usually when we show up. It gives a chance for the inspector to walk through with us, answer any questions. Typically, they'll give their list of main concerns, and those are the ones that we can focus on. When you get it in the writing and in the inspector, they're in a tough spot as well because they run so much liability. So everything kind of has to be handed back to have a certified electrical contractor look at this, have a roofer look at this, because they're not experts in any of those fields. But at least when you have the conversation with them and you can talk it through, they can give their opinion on things. They can talk you through from what they understand without putting it in writing and giving themselves the liability. So I find that that's where you can get the best context on things. I had one actually that the roof ridge, it looked like a big job. It was like we thought it was going to be like $3, $4, $5,000 just based on how the photos went and how it was in the inspection. But talking to the inspector, he's like, no, you should really call a roofing company because this will be less than $500, because he knew how the ridge caps actually worked. And that deal could have absolutely fell apart if we didn't have the chance to talk to him about that and confirm with the roofer and everything. So that's why I think being there for the last half an hour is really important. Being there the whole time to me is a little bit of overkill. I like to let the inspector go and do his thing and just show up with the buyer at the end.
That's a good idea. And so if you're working with a buyer or a seller, so if you have your client, then the recommendation for them also would be to come for the last final walkthrough, last half hour at the end. Give the inspector
Yeah.
some space. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the process. I like to do that every single time with a buyer, and it sets the expectation for them. And that's, when if you're going to work with buyers, I know we're talking about inspectors, but I think a lot of what our job is letting them know what the next steps are and being really good at communicating that, because it's a really tense, like it's actually my niece that I'm working with that's going through for her first purchase. And so sitting down with her and just asking the questions, we go through it every single day. Most people go through it once every 5 to 7 years and even longer now. So the process has changed. Not everybody knows the next step, and a lot of people won't tell you if they're unsure. So you can alleviate a lot of anxiety by just letting them know this is typically how it goes. This is how we would attend an inspection. This is when you get to ask your questions. It's important, and it sets the expectation for them. And I also like to have a conversation of saying, hey, just so you know, when you come in, he's going to find stuff. He could go in a brand new building, he's going to find stuff. So it's not about whether he's going to find stuff or not. It's about how severe they are. And that's where we'll have a discussion with him and just decide how we want to proceed. Because the best case scenario, everything's within reason of the age of the home, and we don't have to do any kind of renegotiation because no one wants that. But if there's stuff that comes up that needs to be addressed, that's when we talk to him, and that's when we can go back.
I think that's a really good piece of advice when you're working with sellers too, is to let them know things. Well, I mean, it could be buyers or sellers, but I think especially sellers is that you want them to find things. They will find things.
They
And
will
it
find
does
things.
become part of the conversation. It is, right and normal for something to come up on the inspection for sure.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking just for the last few minutes, because one of the things that I think has come up in conversation with me a few times too, even with colleagues who work at banks and things, maybe not necessarily hands on with loans, but the thing that gets very confusing and confused is the difference between appraisal, inspection, and what the difference is between the two, and then sometimes even BC assessment. Like, where does that fit into the whole amount of what we're looking at when we're investigating property? But yes, so if you were to give your nice nutshell response for what an appraiser does as opposed to inspector, what would that be?
The appraiser gives an idea of value, and typically they work for the bank, and their job is to make sure that the offer that's being written is within reason of what the market's indicating the value is worth. And this is where it's interesting because a lot of people think, well, if I get an appraisal, is that what the house is worth? And it's not. If it was that easy, being in real estate would be easy. The market price of a home, it fluctuates so much by buyer demand, seller demand, motivations of the buyer, their perceived value. Everything's kind of in flux. And so when they do an appraisal, they kind of say this is within the range of where it should land because no one knows exactly what that final sale price should be. That's their job. And typically, I took some appraisal courses. I don't know it inside and out, but typically, I believe they appraise it three different ways. They appraise it on market value based on past comparable sales, what things have been selling for, what's available. I believe they also do it by replacement cost to give you an idea of how much the replacement cost would be of the house if you were trying to rebuild it today. And then I believe the third one is highest and best use. And that's where they'll appraise based on, well, what would this be worth if it was made out for this type of person, and that gets into more complicated stuff. But at the end of the day, they have different ways of coming up with formulas and analysis of what a home should be worth. And the appraised value can help. Banks want to see that appraised value very close to what the offer's at because they want to make sure that the buyers aren't overpaying and they know exactly how much liability they have. And that's usually why the appraiser comes in. The inspector is there to just find out deficiencies or issues that might cause you some problems down the line. And the BC assessment, you'll have the assessors come out every once in a while, but the BC assessment will typically follow in line with what the sale price was. So if something hasn't sold for a while, the assessment will go up and down based on how other properties in the areas have been going up and down. But then when a sale gets logged at land titles, that's when you'll see your assessment will usually start jumping up closer to where it's at. So in where I'm at, in my area in the interior, they're pretty accurate. Right now, the assessments are actually high because they get appraised before the market started coming down, but are assessed before the market could come down. But now they're starting to settle a little bit, and that's based on the assessment is what you pay tax on. So the city charges you tax for whatever your assessed value is. So again, doesn't have a lot to do with market value. Sometimes I've had it where the assessment might be 300,000 high, 300,000 low. It just kind of depends on where it's sitting and how long it's been since the sale happened and what the market's been doing up and down in the area.
And I've heard BC assessment be referred to as it might be an old reference now. I haven't looked it up in a very long time, but I've heard it being associated with the Kelly Blue Book value.
Oh,
That was
okay.
the way that on paper they used to value vehicles, and so they would just
Yeah,
take like make, model, year, and trim or whatever, and then it would give it like a standard value. And
that makes sense.
I think that is kind of what it is because they'll look at square feet, lot size, how many levels maybe even, but the BC assessment looks at very bare bones basics on the stats of your house, not really taking as much look at condition, location, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's actually a good example. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it did for me as well. Now, I mean, before we get back into, the busy weekend that I think that you have a bit of travel coming up to, and I'm going to go and play in the sun a little bit.
Enjoy what's behind you. Yeah, I don't blame you.
Do you have any other advice or anything that's come up this week that you haven't really thought about in a while, or something else like a last thought on inspections in particular, something to pay attention to that maybe gets missed sometimes?
Well, what do I have for advice for someone for the inspections? You know what wasn't typical, which was kind of nice, is that there was in the house that we went to, there was some concern about some electrical issues. And we actually hired an electrician to come in as well as the inspector. And that was kind of neat. I don't get to do that all the time, but it was kind of cool because the inspector that I use all the time, he's super knowledgeable. The electrician that came in was super knowledgeable, and they could kind of collaborate and have the conversation. So I think one other thing, if you're going to do that, I think it was good practice to let both parties know that the other party was going to be there, and so that no one's stepping on toes, no one's trying to take the lead, just saying, hey, I know that you as an inspector can't give direct advice on electrical. We're going to bring in an electrician. This is who he is, and make the introduction. I think that was just more of a professional courtesy, but it was something that when I was going through it, I was thinking, man, this could have been kind of awkward if both parties weren't aware that this was going to happen, because now you get that power struggle over who has the higher authority. So that would be my advice, because you don't always have to go just inspector. Sometimes it is nice when to bring in those specialties when there is a concern in a certain area.
Right. And then do you have the electric contacts in your own contact list, or do you sometimes take maybe advice from the inspector themselves, who knows like an electrical contractor that they've worked with before, that the inspector themselves likes the opinion of?
Both. Yeah, I
Both.
have both. So it depends how comfortable I am in the trade. You've got electricians and roofers that I'm really close with that I just know are really good. If I don't have something in a specific trade, like a plumber or something that I can for sure put my name behind, then I'll talk to the inspector and see if they have anyone that they would. Just because those handoffs to trades, and even just professionals in general, they're pretty delicate. So I want to make sure that if I don't have direct experience or have the comfort level, that I find someone that does, and the inspector could be a second plan B for that stuff. So I do both.
And part of the pre-conversation, I think, with sellers too, that has been really helpful, and if for anyone who's thinking about selling their property, is that in the purchase of contract and sale, when there's a clause for inspection, I generally, when I'm helping buyers, I put inspections in
Right. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
so that there is a heads up that it might not just be one appointment. Sometimes it does work out that the different professions do have to come at their schedules don't allow for the same timing.
That makes sense. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, I think that was a really nice overview of this topic for today. And
Yeah.
I think that I will look forward to the next one, just like always. And I am starting to get a few little comments coming in asking for
Oh,
different
cool.
topics to come up. So I'm banking them,
Very
and
cool.
I'll make sure I'm bringing them forward.
That's awesome. That's very cool. And enjoy your time down there. Next week I'll be away, so I'll be doing it from some remote site.
Amazing. I can't wait to see what your backdrop is next week. All right.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Thanks
Okay,
everyone
have
for
fun.
listening.
Yeah,
Hey,
thank you.
see you.
Bye.
Bye.